Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. It is another new release week here in Nintendo Land, and while it's not an all-new Zelda game like it was a few short weeks ago, we do have a new game from another one of Nintendo's long-established franchises starring several of its flagship characters. That's right, everybody. It is Super Mario Party Jamboree week. We will be getting a full review of this long-anticipated game, and joining me to deliver said review is IGN Database Manager and regular on the Nintendo Voice Chat podcast, Logan Plant. Logan, how are you?
Hey, Brian, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. No, it's not a new Zelda game, but I think it's better than that new Zelda game. I'm in love with Mario Party Jamboree.
We had the Hot Takes episode last week, so you might have to come back for another one of those, but yeah, it's great to have you on here. I'm excited to talk all about Mario Party Jamboree. I unfortunately did not get a chance to play it in either pre-release or the review period. I did, Nintendo did graciously just pass me a code.
Oh, great.
But, I have not had a chance to fire it up because I was getting set up for this podcast. But shout out to Nintendo for sending me over a code so I can check it out to talk about it on future episodes. But to be timely, we're going to be talking about it with you on this very episode during the main segment. But we have other business to attend to first. If you've ever listened to this podcast, you know that we have a tried and true tradition here on All Things Nintendo, and that's getting to know debuting guests through the lens of their history with Nintendo. So I'm going to ask you two questions here. The first part of this is, what was your first Nintendo game? This can be your first memory with Nintendo, your first game you ever owned, first game you ever played, however you want to interpret this.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways I could go with it because I've been surrounded by Nintendo games my whole life. My parents were big Nintendo fans, and so a story that's really relevant to this week is that when I was really little, I think younger than 3 years old even, and they were playing the first Mario Party on Nintendo 64, and I really wanted to play, but they only had 3 controllers, one for each of my parents and one for my sister. And so I was throwing fits that I wasn't allowed to play with them. So my mom had to go out and get an extra controller that I just held on to, even though I still wasn't playing, but I thought I was. So I don't remember that though, but I've literally been surrounded by Mario Party my whole life. I'd say the earliest one that I vividly remember is Wind Waker. I watched my dad play The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker when it was new on GameCube, and I was probably 4 years old at the time. And one of my earliest vivid memories is, spoilers for The Wind Waker, Link plunging the sword into Ganondorf's forehead at the end. And it was easily the most violent thing I'd ever seen in my life to that point, and I don't think I'll ever forget seeing it for the first time.
That definitely sticks with you through the years. I mean, even I playing it in adulthood, I never actually played it on GameCube. I tried to play it, but I kind of bounced off of it. I think, when was that? Like 2004?
Yeah, or a little earlier, yeah.
So I was in high school, so I'm extremely old, Logan, and it was I thought I was too cool for the cartoony cell shaded graphics. You were too young for that discourse, but like. Yeah. The discourse that you see on social media right now, that was one of like the early versions of that, where it was like, they showed the demonstration of Link looking like, Ocarina of Time Link fighting Ganondorf as like a tech demo. And then they brought out like Wind Waker was their announcement, and everybody lost their freaking minds because they're like, wait, we wanted the cool, like mature looking Zelda. What is this like cartoon nonsense? And, it really backfired on them to the point that they actually took that feedback to heart and, course corrected, if you want to call it that, with Twilight Princess.
Yeah, which is interesting because now Wind Waker is the one that everyone praises as this timeless art style. And I love Twilight Princess, but people don't seem to think that one's aged quite as well.
Well, Nintendo and I mean, just gaming fans in general are nothing if not reactionary.
Yes. So they don't know what they want either.
But yeah, I did finally play it all the way through when it came to Wii U, and it is an absolute masterpiece aside from that Triforce hunt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, but Ocarina of Time is my favorite of the classic Zelda games. But speaking of favorites, that leads to the second part, which is, what is your favorite Nintendo game of all time?
Yeah, well, we're sticking in the same franchise because it's The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I think that
Let's
that is just
go.
I think it's the best game ever made. I don't even really think
Wow.
it's all that close. I just think all the systems that it tries and succeeds at pulling off are just incredible. It's a miracle that that thing runs on Nintendo Switch as well as it does, and just returning to the world of Breath of the Wild but with so much more to do and feeling so rewarded for having played Breath of the Wild by returning to these towns and characters and locations. It's just amazing. I played 190 hours of it last year, and
Oh my
I
god.
want them to drop master mode so I can do it again, even though I don't think they're ever going to. But yeah, I adore it. And that replaced Ocarina and Twilight as my favorite Zelda games. So yeah,
Wow.
Zelda's my number one.
So Breath of the Wild didn't do it for you in the same way that like cuz that ultimately Ocarina was my favorite game of all time for 20
Mhm.
years and then Breath of the Wild is what dethroned it. So Breath of the
Okay.
Wild didn't serve any time in that like pole position for you?
No, it didn't. I really enjoyed Breath of the Wild, but I am one of those people that has those criticisms that it just lacked a lot of kind of that Zelda juice that I think
Hmm.
Tears of the Kingdom brought back. I didn't like the divine beasts, and I found that the exploration was great, but usually the reward was a Korok or a treasure chest with a weapon in it. And I think Tears of the Kingdom really improved upon that with really rewarding rewards for exploring, like the side quests you would stumble upon, the side adventures that they kind of blew up and had these bigger arcs you'd follow, like being a journalist. I loved being a journalist for the Lucky Clover. It was like my dream to write news in Hyrule. Come on, it was awesome.
Fair enough. I think that it's hard for me because I always think about Tears of the Kingdom and I think, okay, it's probably a better game than
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild. But Breath of the Wild's impact on me was so much more pronounced
Hmm.
because it was the first of that style. And I would say that Breath of the Wild was them laying that style out, and Tears of the Kingdom is them kind of just like, expanding on it exponentially and more or less mastering it. And
Yeah.
so it's hard for me to reconcile with being like, yeah, Breath of the Wild's my favorite, even though I probably acknowledge that Tears of the Kingdom is a little bit better.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's both of them are phenomenal games. I can't fault anybody for thinking one is better than the other. It's kind of like the Super Mario World, Super Mario 3 debate, where it's like
Yeah.
I have my preference, but if you think the other one is better,
What's your
then
preference?
Mario World.
Okay, me too. Yeah, I'm on the world side
Yeah.
also.
I mean, I think it's objectively the better game, but I also understand that 3 was like the first one to do it in that style.
Hmm.
So, yeah. All right. Well, before we jump into the news, now is as good a time as any to remind you that you can support the All Things Nintendo podcast through different methods. The best way is through the Patreon page, which offers bonuses like early and ad-free episodes, access to the community Discord, which is blowing up lately, and priority for Q&A episodes and hot takes episodes like we did in recent weeks. And if you come in at the $10 level, you get an entire second weekly podcast called All Things Gamers, which is industry wide. Other ways to support the show include our merch shop on tpublic.com and my YouTube channel, which you can find at Brian P. Shea. All right, Logan, we have quite a bit of news to get to before we get
Yeah.
to your Mario Party review. But we're going to do our best to kind of, be selective with the stories that we jump into. So, in the past, we've had another tradition on top of first Nintendo game, favorite Nintendo game, and that was starting the news segment with Pokemon news. Because for a while, it felt like we were getting Pokemon news every single week.
Yeah. Hmm.
It has certainly slowed down since we don't have. This is the first Pokemon or the first year we have not gotten a Pokemon game in quite some time, like a
Hmm.
mainline or like a Game Freak developed Pokemon game, or even like a remake, like the Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl.
Yeah.
Um, so we're going to start with Pokemon news this episode as well, but unfortunately, it's not for good reasons. Over the last weekend, Game Freak was actually, it came out that Game Freak was hacked in August. And a lot of the data made its way onto the internet. And I saw this rundown of it over on NintendoLife.com. Game Freak confirmed the hack, so it's no longer speculation. And the information has begun circulating. So I'm not going to go into too much depth about what the leak contained because I don't want to, really draw too much attention to it aside from just covering what it was. But it did contain source code for multiple games and information on the new mainline game that is, according to the leak, targeting Switch 2, but also possibly being tested for Switch 1 to see if it would work. I think they shouldn't do that. I think they should just, based on Scarlet and Violet, they should just target that Switch 2
I
and
know
make it as
what's
good as
Game
possible.
Freak's definition of working. Like, do they think Scarlet and Violet worked? Because I wouldn't say that they really worked.
No, no. I mean, Yeah, I'm a Scarlet and Violet defender. I will stand
Hmm.
by. I think I gave it an 8.25 out of 10, but it would have been like a 9.25 if it like works the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
It
Hmm.
was a really fun Pokemon game, but it just was, broken and never really got all that much better. But according to the leak, the Switch 2's code name is Ounce, which I wonder if that kind of indicates they're going for like a lighter weight
Yeah.
form factor. And then, according to this leak, development on Pokemon Legends ZA is already finished, and it appears as though Game Freak at least explored a collaboration with another studio. So, Logan, how did you kind of take in this news, and what did you think about you know what we're hearing? I mean, on the surface level, obviously, there's also several memes that have spawned out of some of the information.
Hmm.
I'm not going to go into it, but there was a big thing with Typhlosion that people have really latched onto. Seems like maybe somebody got a little carried away with creating a one of those like I've talked about like semi disturbing Pokemon Pokedex entries,
Yeah.
and I think the
Hmm.
Typhlosion one might be one of a case of those where, and then they maybe went a little too far, so they just kind of
Hmm.
pocketed it. But like, what was your big takeaway from like this news aside from like, hey, it's a bummer that this happened?
Yeah, that is always my first takeaway from these things. And Nintendo and Nintendo adjacent companies like Game Freak have really struggled this year with leaks. We had the whole Puro saga on Twitter, who was just
Hmm.
spoiling every announcement in a Nintendo Direct. They finally squashed that one, and now this happens over at Game Freak. So that just does really bum me out. And as far as what we're seeing, yeah, the Switch 2 codename stuff is fascinating. I'm unsure if it's Ounce or Oz because some places show it as like OZ, like
Oh,
Wizard of Oz, but then others say that it's Ounce. So yeah, that's all unclear. And again, this is all stuff that's coming from Japan that the people who stole this information or people who have found it are translating. So all of it should be taken with a grain of salt. And then there's also plenty of people taking this time to insert fake leaks into the mix and say it's from the Pokemon Leaks. So it's just a mess and it's hard to know really what to believe right now. But the Legends EA stuff is really interesting because if they're truly done with development on that, I'm sure glad it's not coming out this year. It means they're maybe polishing it and maybe this game won't come out completely broken. And I think that that's a good sign that they truly listened after everything that happened with Scarlet and Violet because Legends Arceus, I think, is the best Pokemon game on Switch. It still
I
does not
agree.
run that great. It does not look very good either. And then Scarlet and Violet took all those problems that Arceus had and just dialed them up to 11. So if this next one can actually be a good swan song for Switch that runs well on the hardware and is a solid Pokemon game all around, that will leave a much better taste in my mouth for this series because I've been soured on it because every game has had a big but on Switch. It's like, oh, Sword and Shield, but it doesn't have all the Pokemon, right? The Dexit Gate that was a huge drama, or Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Those games had a ton of issues despite being a remake of one of my favorite generations. So I think every game's had just an asterisk, and I hope that Legends EA can be the one to kind of break that curse.
Yeah, and I've talked about a lot about Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. It's like, oh my god, they remade the one that started it all.
Yeah. Hmm.
But these weird like motion control Pokemon Go inspired, oh, I hated it. I hated that part of it. I loved the rest of it. Like I thought the rest of it was awesome to like go
Hmm.
back. Yeah, I agree with you. Like every single Pokemon game released on the Switch, and I'm with you with Legends Arceus. I think that I think I just talked about how on All Things Gamers this week that that is the best Pokemon game in my opinion in 15 years.
Since
Since
Hard Gold Soul Silver?
exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I
I mean,
totally
I
agree.
think people would argue Black and White.
Hmm.
I know there's a lot of love for that, but I never really got into those games. But Heart Gold, Soul Silver are my favorite Pokemon games of all time, and it's like Legends Arceus was probably the best Pokemon game since those, which is wild because those were on DS and they were remakes of a Game Boy Color games.
Yeah. Yeah, that have 2 regions, still the only ones to do that. It's
Oh
pretty
god,
wild
it's
what
so
what those
cool.
games pulled off, but what I always say about Arceus is that I feel like it showed me that, at least as an adult playing Pokemon games, I'm much more enthralled by gotta catch 'em all than wanting to be the very best, and I think that I want Pokemon to keep striking out in that direction because, let's face it, Pokemon just beating the main game is so easy nowadays because they're for kids, which is fine. But it's these RPGs that's just one party member out in the field at a time. And I've just kind of lost interest in that. But Arceus showed me, wow, you can completely reinvent how things work in this world and just stealthing around the Pokemon, trying to hit them from the back with your Pokeball. It was brilliant. And I'm so excited we're getting another Legends game.
I know, and I'm a little concerned about the direction they're taking because isn't it just taking entirely in Lumio City?
Yeah. Yeah. We don't really know what that's
How
going to
does
look
that
like.
work?
Yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, because like the whole thing with Legends Arceus, where you're going out into the wilderness, and it's like, all right, well, if we're in this like built-up city, are you going to be catching Pokemon within the city walls? Like that seems weird.
Yeah, are you going to be expanding the city and going into the nature surrounding the city? And maybe just the initial teaser was a little misleading, saying entirely within Lumio City. We don't know. I'm sure they'll find some way to make exploration a big thing.
Yeah, but if anything, you're right. Legends Arceus did show us that there are new ways that they can surprise us with like the tried and true formula because, I think that was the big complaint a lot of people had with Sword and Shield was like, yeah, it didn't have all the Pokemon, but also like it just perfectly followed the Pokemon formula like to a T. And I didn't mind it because I always loved the Pokemon formula, but I
Hmm.
understand people wanting a more innovative leap to like home consoles than what we got with Sword and Shield.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, next up, Nintendo hopelessly tries to prevent another leak. So, Logan, we talked last week about how Nintendo is holding a mysterious playtest for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. People were able to sign up for this program when it went live last week, and apparently it filled up within a minute. And you told me right before we started recording you got into this playtest.
I did, yeah, and I'm one of the only people at IGN that ended up getting in. We were all talking about it, and you basically it ended in 5 seconds. It wasn't even a minute. It was 5 seconds. You had to click through both things that you needed to progress through as fast as possible. You couldn't even read the rules on page two. You just had to click accept, and then you were in. And yeah, it was really hard to get into this thing. But what's it going to be, Brian? I have no idea.
Well, Nintendo sent out the following message, said, quote, "We request that you do not discuss or disclose content from either the Nintendo Switch online playtest program, test software, or website with others." So they're trying to prevent people from talking about it. The playtest is going to run from October 23rd to early November. From what I understand, people who are in the playtest, such as yourself, will be receiving a code on October 21st, um, and we still don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. You're even in the program and
Hmm.
you have no idea. But in potentially related news, interesting timing on this one. It's being reported that Nintendo is starting to ramp up to ship a new wave of GameCube controllers. And the info comes from a user on Resetera, and it's unclear if this is in anticipation of the launch of Switch 2 or for the service being tested by the playtest that starts next week. But it's also like I've seen people dive into like the URL of the playtest site, and it seems to
Hmm.
indicate that there might be something to do with GameCube. So I mean that I think that is the clubhouse leader.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, Nintendo did put out a statement teasing an update to the expansion pack
Hmm.
service, saying, "quote What excitement will the next year bring for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack members? Stay tuned to find out." So is that your best guess for what this could be? Some sort of GameCube like streaming library?
Yeah, I think that's a really solid guess. And we were talking about this last night on my other Nintendo show, Toadstool Boardroom, and my guys over there were saying that this could be cloud-based GameCube games, and that's why they're having to test it, right? Because
Hmm.
GameCube games in file size are much larger than Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, or anything else they've put on Switch Online to this point. So maybe instead of letting us download them individually, they've decided on some sort of cloud-based solution, which would be a big bummer to me. I love GameCube games like F-Zero GX that require really precise inputs and timing, and I don't know if that would really work on cloud streaming. So if that is what this beta test is, that's really fascinating. And it's also one of the only things I can think of that would require them to recruit 10,000 people to test out, right? They've put plenty of new features in Switch Online and never done anything like this before. So it's almost like they have built some sort of new cloud server that they need to really test the load on, and that could be GameCube.
Yeah, and it would be a bummer if it's cloud based. Like I've been pretty anti cloud based gaming for Switch in particular, just
Yeah.
because it's one of the big selling points is it's handheld. I can take it on a plane, and it's like I don't want to
Hmm.
buy a cloud based version of Control because I could just play a better version of it on my PS5, and I'm not going to be able to take it on the go anyway. So I guess like it's good for people who only own a Switch,
Hmm.
but at the same time it's like, man, I wish they could just figure out a way to like make these games just work, or give us an option. Like if I'm going to go on a flight, like allow me to like temporarily download, Mario Kart Double Dash so I can play it while I'm on a flight or
Yeah.
something, because that plane Wi-Fi is not going to support
Yeah.
game streaming.
Hmm.
If this does end up being GameCube streaming or a library or whatever, maybe it's actually you get to download them, but you have to play online with people for this playtest. Like maybe
Hmm.
that's what it is. But if this does end up being a GameCube library, what are your top 3 GameCube games that you would want included?
Oh, F-Zero GX, absolutely. I'm an enormous F-Zero fan, and now that they added Climax, a GP Legend, to the Game Boy Advance app, GX is the only F-Zero game that's not on Switch. It's unbelievable, and it's my favorite one also, so I definitely want to see that there. And then I think Double Dash, you called it out, but that's such a great Mario Kart, and to have online functionality for these games is pretty incredible. Like playing Mario Party 2 online against 3 other people has been so cool on Nintendo Switch. And I think that Double Dash would just be a really awesome, similar experience. And then a third one, I want the Mario parties also, the GameCube Mario parties I want to show up because they're remaking all these Nintendo 64 boards in the new Mario parties, but there's no GameCube board representation. So to get 4 through 7 on would be awesome.
Yeah, those are great picks. I was never a big GameCube guy, but yeah, Double Dash. I mean, if we're not going to get Wind Waker HD, then put Wind Waker on
Yeah,
there. And
yeah, that's
honestly, I would
true.
like the Four Swords game from GameCube
Oh, that
Adventures.
is a
Yeah,
brilliant call. Yeah.
that would be awesome to have a way to play that on modern systems, and then put the Game Boy Advance version on that library, and have some sort of connectivity. I mean,
Yeah.
seems like it would be pretty cool. It'd probably be very complicated, and Nintendo
Yeah.
sometimes doesn't really know how to make things
Mhm.
modernized. We'll say they're always about like 5 or 6 years behind the curve when it comes to like modern features. But
It wouldn't be more complicated than the original way to play Four Swords Adventures, though.
that's
It would
fair.
definitely be easier than that.
That's fair. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I'm assuming, like I posted this on Twitter, that like, yeah, I don't think people should break NDAs. I'm not advocating for that.
Mhm.
But Nintendo must know that as soon as this information goes to the
Yeah.
people, it is going to be a race to see who puts it on their social media account as like soonest.
Mhm. Yeah, it's which puts, like, me in a tricky position, right? Because 'Cause I'm gonna sign an NDA, and then I'm gonna participate in this thing, and I'm gonna go on podcasts, and the information's gonna be out there, but I'm gonna be sworn to secrecy. It's messy, and I don't know why they're doing it this way. Like, we're journalists, we sign NDAs for Nintendo all the time, and we follow those. You're not going to get 10,000 Nintendo super fans to abide by those same rules that aren't trained to do so, that don't have experience doing so, and that maybe don't know the consequences of not doing so. I think it's going to be a disaster. I don't know why they don't just announce it today.
Yeah, they should announce it like the morning of the 21st,
Hmm.
and then send out the codes and everything, and so that way people just they they don't have to like spoil the party, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like Nintendo spoils their own party, but like it's like they have to know that's going to happen. Like again, I'm not advocating for anybody to break an NDA, but somebody's going to, and it's
Yes.
going to be multiple people trying to be the first to break the NDA.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
it's why are they doing it to themselves this time? Some leaks are they're attacked, it's unavoidable, whatever. There's a mole, but this they are literally doing to themselves. They're like telling their 10,000 biggest fans, "Here's this secret. It's a secret to everybody." It's not going to be.
Nice reference. All
Thanks.
right. Well, from Nintendo trying to be sneaky to mass confusion by one of gaming's greatest composers. Earlier this week, the iconic composer behind most of the Final Fantasy games, Nobuo Uematsu, put out a video saying that Fantasia Neo Dimension will be his quote final project as a composer of video game music. And if you're not familiar with Uematsu, his credits include Final Fantasies 1 through 11, select music for Final Fantasy 12 and Final Fantasy 14, Lost Odyssey, Blue Dragon, and the main theme of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and the main themes of Final Fantasy 7 Remake and Rebirth. Not a bad resume. But this obviously this is going to grab a lot of attention and
Mhm.
headlines, and apparently nobody was more confused by these headlines than Nobuo Uematsu, who put out a follow-up tweet with a lot of exclamation points. He said, quote, wait, wait, wait. Everybody calm down. There seems to be some misunderstanding, but I'm not retiring from video game music work. I'm going to cut back a bit on my video game music work because I want to have more time to make the music I want to make. It would be difficult for me to take on the entire soundtrack of a video game because the time commitment for composing would be too long. but I would like to continue to work on jobs such as one theme song, which, like I said, it's what he did for Final Fantasy VII
Hmm.
Remake, Rebirth, and Super Smash Bros. Brawl. He's done that for several other games, but he did the full soundtrack for Fantasia Neo Dimension, which is great because it was him reuniting with his longtime collaborator Hironobu Sakaguchi, who was the creator of Final Fantasy.
Hmm.
Uh, what did you take away from this? Like, were you like, oh, that's a bummer because he's retiring, and then you're like, oh, he's not retiring, but then it's like, oh, he's just doing one song for like the games he works on.
Yeah, well, we've got a third part of that Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy coming up that surely he'll make the theme song for there. But yeah, it's interesting. We're getting to a point in gaming where we're about to pass the torch. A lot of kind of the people who have been here since the beginning are beginning to shift away from roles. In Nintendo, we're seeing it with Miyamoto. He was
Oh
not
yeah.
credited in Echoes of Wisdom, the first Zelda game that doesn't feature his name in the credits. And it's just a really interesting time because this is a medium that the kind of creators of are still mostly around for, and that is not going to be true forever. And it is a bittersweet thing, but yeah, I think it's creators like this deserve to kind of move on and do things they want to do. I mean, look at that resume you listed. He's earned it. And to show up for a theme song here and there for a remake part 3 and maybe the next Smash Brothers game, yeah, that's super cool.
Do you think the Switch 2 is the final console that Shigeru Miyamoto works on? I think I saw this debate over on the Kit and Krista podcast,
Hmm.
and I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I think that it very well could be. And
Oh, I hate that.
I know it's I hate it, but also at the same time, you got to try and soak in the era that we're in, where people like Miyamoto and Aonuma and Sakurai are still around making games at Nintendo, because some of them are making the best games they've ever made. Like I talked all about Tears of the Kingdom. I think that's the best game of all time. And yeah, these are creators that are still at the peak of their powers. Miyamoto, not so much. He's not really doing game stuff anymore. But Sakurai making Smash Brothers Ultimate as his last gift to Iwata. Like, we're in a really cool time for Nintendo that I think is going to feel very sentimental very quickly once some of these guys start to step down.
Oh man, yeah, I just looked it up, and Shigeru Miyamoto is 71 years old,
Yeah.
so probably
Hmm.
72 by the time the Switch 2 comes out. The Switch 2 is probably, I mean, if it's anything like the Switch 1, it's going to have 7 or 8 or maybe even 9 years of
Hmm.
life. I don't see Miyamoto doing what he does into his 80s, so yeah, that's probably going to be the case. That's a sad thought, and
Yeah.
people like Nobuo Uematsu stepping away. I mean, with that is probably going to come retirements of people like Koji Kondo and
Hmm.
Takashi Tezuka, all these incredible luminaries. So it is
Yeah.
very sad to see these guys stepping away, and the trailblazers of this industry. And I've had the great fortune of being able to meet a lot of them, and I
That's
actually
amazing.
did. One of the first people, like first like absolute legends that I got to meet in real life was Nobuo Uematsu. So I
That's
saw
super cool.
him perform with his band, the Earthbound Papas, at MagFest back in January 2012. And it definitely felt like a once in a lifetime experience at the time. And what do you know? That has certainly held up. I have not even come close to
Yeah.
crossing paths with him again. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
I was just like walking around the convention center, and I just so happened to, I was like, oh, let me cut through this like courtyard to get to the other side, because there was like a mob of people, and it was like,
Hmm.
oh, that's going to take forever to get to the other side of. So I saw there was a courtyard that I could exit out into and then go around the crowd. And it just so happened that the Earthbound Papas were doing like a photo shoot out in the courtyard. So I have this picture, and they were all supposed to be looking at the cameraman who was doing the photo shoot for them,
Uh-huh.
but Nobuo Uematsu was looking directly at my camera while his entire band is looking in the other direction. I'm like, sorry guys, I probably messed up that shot.
That's awesome. But you got a great one though. That's super cool.
Yeah, so that was awesome to be able to do that. And then obviously in the time since, I've met several of these other folks, and he was just a joyful guy. I don't know if you've ever gone to MagFest,
Mm-mm.
but there's an inside joke that has developed, because they have, it's music and gaming fest. It takes place just outside of Washington D.C. every January, and it started out as this kind of small get together of like people who are passionate about like video games and the music in video games. They'd always have like people like get up there and like, oh, this is a Mega Man metal cover band, or this band's going to get up and play Zelda music in like this other style. And then like they'd start having like honored guests, and even back then like getting Nobuo Uematsu and the Earthbound Papas was a huge get. And
Yeah.
they started getting higher profile guests, and everybody's just staying in the same hotel, so it's like just this debauchery happening. And there's also this big, like, just giant convention floor sized free play arcade where all these vendors bring in their old or restored arcade cabinets, and people can play them at no cost. And the one that everybody always referenced was the X-Men arcade cabinet, because for some reason you could hear, like, I don't know if you ever played the X-Men arcade game,
Mhm.
Colossus, he does this roar when he does his special
Yeah.
attack.
Mhm.
And it just, you could hear it echoing all hours of the night, 'cause it's 24 hours, it's
Uh-huh.
open. So it became a thing where anytime you hear, or anytime you see somebody, you can do that, like in the halls, and they would have to do it back. So you would just hear people doing it 24 hours a day, back and forth. And the reason I bring
That's
this up,
awesome.
and it is funny because they had to start putting signs up because people would be staying in the hotel, not at MagFest.
Mhm.
And it would be like, they would have signs like in the lobby, and it would just have like a picture of Colossus doing his ultimate, and it with a giant circle and X through it, like, so they
Uh-huh.
caught onto it. But Nobuo Uematsu got up and he did the Colossus roar on stage. And it was hilarious, and
That's
yeah, it
great.
was so
Like a
cool to see him embrace
convention-wide
it.
inside joke. That's super funny.
And it's endured all through the years. I really want to go back to Magfest. I haven't been since, I think, 2014. So I really want to go back to that. PAX East is the other one I haven't gone back
Mm,
to since I started working at Game Informer. Like, it's wild.
mhm.
I've been to all the other ones, but not. PAX East was my first ever convention back in
Cool.
2011. So it was really cool to, it would be cool to go back, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess Nobuo Uematsu, I'm glad that he's stepping away. I hope this is like, how old is he now? I looked up Miyamoto's age. Uh, he's got to be around the same age. Okay, he's 65. And is he living in Hawaii now too? Because I know that's where Sakaguchi has kind of like
Oh, I
based
have no
his.
idea. Interesting.
Yeah, Sakaguchi decided to base his studio in Hawaii.
Okay, cool.
I don't know where he's living now. I'm not going to read his Wikipedia page on the air here, but yeah, I hope that, I'm glad that he's going to continue making these main themes. It would feel weird if he made the theme for Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth and did not make the third part's main theme, especially since Hollow, from Final Fantasy VII Remake,
Mhm.
I think that is a top tier Final Fantasy song.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's one of the greatest gaming vocal tracks, I would say, of all
Mhm.
time, but also one of the best Final Fantasy main themes. So yeah, happy that he is sticking around and doing more and not putting too much strain on himself. Everybody deserves to enjoy their retirement.
Yes. Yeah, you don't have
But
to make stuff forever. You don't.
exactly. But Logan, do you own any of Analogue's systems?
I don't, but I might very soon.
The one I've been tempted by, I am not a handheld guy whatsoever,
Mm,
but man, was I tempted by the Analog Pocket. It was just such a,
yeah.
a
Mhm.
thing of beauty. I did not get it though. But yeah, this one is hard to ignore, because this week Analog announced the Analog 3D. It is a reimagining of the Nintendo 64 with 4K resolution, 100% compatibility with every N64 cartridge, region free, by the way, has Bluetooth capabilities, dual band Wi Fi, 4 controller ports if you want to use your OG N64 controllers, and absolutely no emulation. It plays all these cartridges natively. And they also worked with 8BitDo to create a modernized N64 controller, but in the form factor of like almost like a Switch Pro controller, it looks
Mhm.
like.
Yeah.
And if anybody's listened to this show before, which I'm assuming this isn't everybody's first episode, you know that my biggest complaint with like the N64 library on Switch Online is that it's hard to play those games with a modern controller.
Yeah, it's
And
weird. It's really wonky, and they don't
yeah,
really give you much choice to fix it.
yeah, the buttons just don't map properly.
Mhm.
And they claim to have fixed that with this controller. And it's single analog stick, and in the upper right, it only has the 2 normal face buttons, but then it has the C buttons up on the side.
Mhm.
It looks like it might just be crazy enough to work. You can also take screenshots, remap your buttons however you want, use whatever Bluetooth controller you want, or you can just plug in the original N64 controllers. It is available for pre-order on October 21st, so same day you're going to be getting your your playtest
Yeah.
code, and it's going to cost $250. And then the 8-bit do controller I mentioned will be sold separately for $40, and it's set to come out next year. So you sound like you're pretty tempted by this. Why is this the one?
I think because N64 is just the best 4-player multiplayer system maybe of all time. It has so many classics, Smash 64, Mario Kart, the Mario parties. There's so much fun stuff to play. But I
GoldenEye.
still, yeah, GoldenEye. I never really grew up with that one, but yeah, that's a classic, obviously too. And my N64, it has started to just crash all the time with the cartridges. There's
Oh
something wrong
no.
about my pin connector. I don't know what it is. I'm not good with this old tech stuff. So to have a way to just plug my N64 into my 4K TV and play Smash 64 with friends, that just sounds super tempting, because Smash 64 specifically, they haven't put on Switch Online. It's not there. So
It's
there's
so
no way to
weird.
play that on modern hardware. So yeah, and also it's a really nice looking system. So I'm super tempted. I'm not entirely sure because I'm worried that this is something I would buy and then play for 10 minutes and then never touch again, just because there's so many modern games to play. It's hard to go back and find the time to play classic stuff. But by far the most I've been tempted by an analog thing.
Yeah, that's always been my thing too. Is I bought back in like 2015. I got like one of the Retrons
Okay.
that plays like NES, Famicom, Super NES, Genesis, and the Game Boy games up to Game Boy Advance, I think.
Hmm.
And I played through Pokemon Leaf Green on it, and then I never touched it again because
Yeah.
like there's so much I need to play that's like
Yeah.
modern and like new games coming out that I want to, especially when I was with Game Informer, like I wanted to be a part of the discussion with that, and I wanted to be informed, so when like end of year stuff happened, I'd be able to
Hmm.
be like, oh no, that doesn't belong on our top games of the year, or yes, this absolutely should be like one of our top whatever games of the year.
Yeah.
So it was always hard to go back and play retro games. But is Smash 64 the number one game you're wanting to fire up on this analog 3D?
Yeah, I think so, just because it's like the one they haven't brought to Switch. The Mario parties are there, Mario Kart is there, GoldenEye is there, and that's just not. And I don't know why. So that'd definitely be the one.
Star Fox 64, I know it's on Switch Online, and in fact
Hmm.
I would argue it's probably the game that translates the best to like a modern gamepad.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
was able to play through it in its entirety on just my Switch Pro controller,
Hmm.
but it's still there's something about playing it with like an N64 controller with a rumble pack. I'm assuming that they're gonna have rumble pack compatibility. I'm assuming that they're
I
going
hope
to
so.
have
Yeah.
like the expansion pack will probably be built in, so you don't have,
Hmm.
if you want to play Majora's Mask or
It is.
Donkey
Yeah.
Kong 64. Okay, great. But yeah, that's exciting. We're talking a lot about like playing retro games on this
Yeah.
episode,
Yeah.
and we're going to continue because did you ever play Jedi Power Battles?
I didn't know. This is one I
Neither did
missed.
I. Well, Aspire Media is remastering it for the 25th anniversary of the game. This version has the unlocked secret characters like Darth Maul and Queen Amidala, plus the original cast like Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Qui-Gon Jinn. It also includes 13 new playable characters that you unlock after your first playthrough. There's droids, there's Tusken Raiders, there's other characters. And this version will also have new features like modern controls, toggleable lightsaber colors, and versus and training modes that appeared in later releases, and other features specific to this release. So I brought this up. Someone actually mentioned that, like, I'm excited for Jedi Power Battles to get a remaster in the Q&As that I answered on All Things Gamers.
Hmm.
But they said, should we trust this? Since it comes from Aspire, they were like, hey, I was burned by their ports of Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, but should we trust them? And I kind of pointed out that, like, you can always just wait at this point, right? Like, there's very little utility unless it's a limited release or a collector's edition or anything like that. There's very limited utility in pre-ordering a game in this day and age. Like, you should almost always
Yeah.
wait for
Hmm.
reviews, wait for those day one reports from players if you are concerned that a game might not run. Like, you can always just wait because there's not even a thing where you have to go to a store anymore. You can just download it directly, and if you have even remotely decent internet, especially a game like this where it's not going to be a giant file size, you can hit download, go to the bathroom, get a glass of water, and come back down, and it's probably almost ready to play.
Mm-hmm.
So like for a game like this, you don't necessarily need to pre-order it. You can just wait for the reviews to come out because people are going to review it, and then probably Digital Foundry is going to do their performance analysis, or
Mm-hmm.
people over at IGN are going to write up like, oh, it's plagued with performance problems, or oh, it
Mm-hmm.
runs extremely well on Switch. So I don't know. Like, are you excited at all for this port?
Yeah, I am a child of the prequels. I do love the prequels, and especially how many video games there were about them. Episode 1 Racer, when that one got ported to modern hardware, that's when I grew up playing on Nintendo 64. And so that was fun to pick up and play that one.
Does
I
it
was
play
also
well?
very It was good. Yeah, I really liked it, the remaster. Some people had some issues with it, but I thought it was fine.
That's also Aspire Media, the same company that's doing these ports. So like they do have
Yeah.
they don't have just a crappy track record. Like Battlefront 1 and 2, I would say are almost like the exception, right? They've
Yeah.
always been a pretty solid port house.
Yeah, they've done so many Star Wars ones. They even have that Heritage Pack, which is like 8 games on one Switch cartridge that all have been Aspire. So, yeah, Battlefront was definitely the anomaly that I was also burned by because I loved those games on PS2.
Same.
And yeah, that port was a disaster. But I don't know what the heck happened there, but I don't think it's indicative of what this is going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, I have more faith in Aspire than I have concern, but yeah, the
Yeah.
Battlefront 1 and 2 ports, did they ever fix those?
I don't really know. I didn't keep up with it because I just kind of moved on. I was kind of done.
Because I wanted
Yeah.
to play those because those were my
Yeah.
favorite Star Wars games growing up, and it's a bummer that they didn't pan out. It's almost like the GTA trilogy. What was it,
Yeah.
Definitive
Hmm.
Edition? And they delisted like GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas off of like all the digital storefronts, and then it was like you have to buy this version, and then that version was absolute
Yeah.
garbage, at least at launch. Again, I don't know if they've fixed it, so I'm hoping they fix Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2 because
Hmm.
those are games that deserve good ports.
Hmm.
And finally, we will close out the news segment with this. Last week, I talked about the games that you can expect to play when a compilation that I'm very excited for, Tetris Forever, comes out. And now we know when that will be. So it's going to give you 15 games, including the new Tetris Time Warp. It gives you a virtual museum with artifacts of the past, news clippings, all kinds of stuff, and then over 90 minutes of documentary footage. So we have a release date now. It is arriving on November 12th. And then also speaking of virtual digital eclipse gaming museums, I did recently check out the new DLC to Atari 50, the
Oh,
anniversary
cool.
celebration. uh, I loved this compilation so much.
Hmm.
This is the compilation. Like I've always had a lot of respect for Digital Eclipse. I think they're one of the best studios out there right now. But Atari 50 is the one that really put them over the top for me, and it's so cool to see them continue to expand it. I know I mentioned how old I am. I'm too young for like the OG Atari systems.
Hmm.
Like I was born in 1987, and Nintendo was already dominating the gaming world at that point. Like I had exposure to like the Atari 2600 because like some of my family members had old ones lying around, and so like I
Yeah.
checked them out. But I was always like, why would I ever want to play this when I could play like Super Mario Brothers 3
Yeah. Hmm.
or whatever, like whatever game was out at the time? It's like, no, why would I play a game that looks like this? But obviously there's an appeal to it now because it's extremely nostalgic for many people, and there's a reason to go back and kind of trace the lines of the kind of the DNA of gaming through
Hmm.
these collections. So I'm glad that this collection exists. I think it's clear that it's a labor of love, and that extends to this DLC that just came out. And the one that I've been most excited for is Berserk. I have amazing memories playing the arcade version of Berserk with my dad. And if for those who don't know, Berserk is an extremely rudimentary, early kind of pioneer of the twin stick shooter. So
Hmm.
you're like this little stick figure man running across the screen, and these robots are chasing you, and you just have to they converge on you. They'll shoot at you. They'll say in robot voice, "Catch that humanoid," and it's very very quaint, but so much fun. And I have great memories playing with my dad. We used to have a version of the arcade version of Berserk in our house. So I would come home from school and I would play it, and then my dad would get home from work and I would like be like, "Oh, I beat your high score," and then he would like change out of his work clothes and come down and be like, "All right, well now I'm gonna have to beat your high score." So we would go back and forth in that way,
That's
and
super cool.
yeah, so I have a lot of love for Berserk, and they actually have the arcade version of Berserk. They have the 2600 version of Berserk. They have the 5200 version, or whatever the next upgraded version. And then they also, so Mike Mika, who is one of the head folks over at Digital Eclipse, one of his earliest projects from several years ago was modding the Atari 2600 version of Berserk to include the like voice. Like he was able to modulate the voice on Atari 2600, which was absolutely unheard of at the
Cool.
time. And so there is actually his version of the Atari 2600. It's called Berserk Voice Enhanced. That is
Nice.
also included in this DLC. So it is comprehensive. You know, you have people, luminaries, coming on and talking about games like Breakout and Berserk. And it is an absolute continuation of this labor of love that Atari 50th anniversary celebration is. And I completely, I fall more in love with this anniversary celebration every single time they add more stuff to it. That's why I'm so excited for Tetris Forever, because it's like Tetris, I have a lot more love for Tetris than I ever did any of the Atari games.
Mm-hmm.
So to have the Digital Eclipse treatment being paid to the Tetris franchise, and having, you know, Sergei Pajnitov and Hank Rogers be involved with this, that is so cool to have them, you know, be so involved with this collection. And also, you know, have the historians that are Digital Eclipse putting together, you know, they're the greatest compilation creators of all time, and also an amazing studio in their own right. But yeah, are you as high on Tetris Forever and Atari 50 as I am?
Yeah, I totally am. I think that because Digital Eclipse did a bunch of awesome compilations prior to Atari 50, and they always had kind of, oh, the art books and the concept art and the little information about the releases of the games. But I think that in those cases, like I'm thinking of Mega Man and things like that, the games
Cowabunga
stood,
Collection, yeah.
yeah, the games stood on their own more than Atari games do in 2023 when this collection came out. And so they kind of needed to take that extra step from the museum aspect and make it just this learning experience that it is. It's an amazing compilation that's not really fully about the games. The games are just one puzzle piece in this greater narrative they tell about the history of Atari. And Tetris is such an awesome follow-up to do next. And I love Tetris. It's so infinitely playable still. I'm going to pick this up on day one. I can't wait to learn all about all the different versions they have in here and everything they pack into it. It's just amazing. You're totally right. Atari 50 is amazing. I'm more impressed with it every time I boot it up too, and I think Tetris is going to be the same.
Yeah, I'm extremely, extremely excited for it. It's all part of their Gold Master series, which did start with Atari 50, which was kind of like signaling like, hey, we are taking a different approach to making
Yeah.
these retro
Mhm.
compilations. And since then they did Karateka, which
Yeah,
is
that one's so cool. Oh my gosh.
it's incredible for people who haven't checked it out. Basically, you can play different prototype builds of this game and learn about the making of this title.
Mhm.
It's just absurd they were able to get their hands on all of these different like versions of this game, in development versions.
Yeah.
And then also they did Llama Soft about Jeff Minter. So extremely awesome studio. I can't wait for Tetris Forever. This is like, outside of maybe doing like something for like the Sonic franchise or something with Nintendo,
Mhm.
this is like the one I'm most excited about, right? Like they've even said like, hey, it would be a dream for us to do something with Nintendo, but Nintendo is obviously very secretive and like very like, oh, we'll just do it ourselves, because
Yeah.
they don't like to really work with outside studios all that much, and especially when it's like involving their history. But yeah, I mean, if there's going to be a studio that they might trust and with like a great track record, it would be Digital Eclipse.
Mhm.
But I think that we might never see that, unfortunately.
Yeah, do you see what their museum looks like? They don't care that much about their own history. They don't
Oh
care about
no.
sharing those secrets. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Before we take this break, last week we did close on the Green Day Dookie news. I don't know if you saw this,
Oh
Logan,
yeah,
where
the Game Boy cartridge?
yeah, they're releasing
Yeah.
their songs on unconventional platforms. You know, Teddy Ruxpin and, you know, the Billy Big Mouth Bass.
Mhm.
The one I was talking about was, and I threw my name in the ring for the Game Boy cartridge that played Welcome to Paradise. Shortly after we recorded last week's episode, I received an email telling me I was not selected to be
Oh,
able to purchase the
dang.
cartridge. Did you attempt to buy any of these Green Day
No,
songs?
I didn't, but if I did, it would have been the Game Boy one. If they just had unlimited for sale, I would have, but I saw it was this really limited lottery, so I didn't bother.
I think it was
Super
only
cool though.
25.
Yeah,
25
it's
people were
crazy.
selected. I was not among them, unfortunately. But
Mhm.
we are going to take a break. And when we get back, we'll be getting Logan's review of Super Mario Party Jamboree. We will be right back. this week we got a new release from Nintendo that, I'll be honest, kind of snuck up on me. Super Mario Party Jamboree arrives this week, and it sounded better and better each time I've heard about it. I have not had a chance to play it quite yet, but thankfully, Logan, you have. Did you play the original Super Mario Party on Switch?
I have played every Mario Party there's ever been, all 18 of them. So yeah, Super Mario Party was fine. It felt like a step in the right direction at the time. And I think as we got more distance from it and more years passed, I started to look back at it less fondly and think, oh, there's a lot in that game I didn't really like at all. So I was hesitant when they used the super branding for Super Mario Party Jamboree. How much of a sequel is it going to be? And
Thank you.
Yeah, you felt that way too?
Exact same way.
Yeah,
I
and
did
so
not want another one of those because I was like, no, Mario Party Superstars is clearly the
yes.
superior one. I want more of this style, even though it was a greatest hits compilation. Like, you could make something new in that framework. But so, like, when they were like, oh, we're doing Super Mario Party Jamboree, I'm like, oh no, they're going
Mhm.
to go back to that old style, which would feel like a step in the wrong direction. But it sounds like, based on your review and the reviews of others, that is not the case.
Yeah, I think this is the best Mario Party there has ever been. I don't think I've ever
Whoa.
had more fun with a Mario Party. And I'm saying that as, like I said, someone who's played all 18 of them. It is a complete return to form, but not only does it return to the classic style, it makes amazing improvements and changes to it that make Jamboree feel like there's 5 Mario Party sequels in some alternate universe we never played, where Nintendo Cube was working on iterating and improving the formula. And now here's Jamboree, which feels like a culmination of all this work that we never saw because it's so far and above any other Mario Party game that they've ever made, right? They took over the series with Mario Party 9 back on Wii. And then Superstars, like you said, it's awesome, but it's not really their stuff, right? It's Hudson Soft's boards and mini games. And they retooled them and modernized them. And it was awesome. And it was my favorite Mario Party in years at that point. But Jamboree takes the next step by feeling like Superstars 2, but with all new content. It's everything I could have wanted it to be. It's so brilliant.
Wow. And we got I feel like once they took over, they had some growing pains because
Yeah.
I feel like once they took over, it kind the series kind of meandered
Hmm.
and became like something that it wasn't supposed to be. Like, especially those Wii U Mario Party games,
Yeah.
they felt like the series had really lost its way. And I was like, is this development studio really the ones that should be doing this franchise? But they have absolutely proved me wrong on Switch.
Yeah, it's crazy how many steps they've taken with each next entry since 10, where you can kind of say the series bottomed out. And that is a really, really bad entry. Then 10 to Super, big improvement. Super to Superstars, big improvement. And now that to Jamboree, another huge step. So it's cool because it feels like a development studio that's truly listening to what people want from this series. And their first few entries felt very reactionary from the negative side of Mario Party. There are people who have just never liked Mario Party that complain it's too slow, it's too random, it takes too long to watch other people's turns, I can't even see my character. So, like, okay, put you all in the car. It's a weird co op thing, but still competitive.
Uh,
It didn't work. Or the
no.
3DS entries where you're all taking your turn at the same time, moving around this grid based board. It just didn't work. And now with Jamboree, they're ignoring those people who have been Mario Party haters since the 90s and say, no, we're going to make something that the Mario Party super fans will absolutely love. So, like, there's a big asterisk on this. If you don't like Mario Party, this isn't going to change your mind. But if you've liked the Nintendo 64 and GameCube Mario Parties, you are going to love this game.
So give me the elevator pitch of why Super Mario Party Jamboree is so good and what it does different.
Jamboree has the best boards in the entire Mario Party series. It
Wow.
has so much strategy involved in each turn that you take. And the Nintendo 64 Mario Parties, you can maybe get one item. In Mario Party 3, you can get a few more. And you roll your dice and just kind of see what happens. In Jamboree, you are making decisions at branching paths. You're choosing between 6 options at these shops of what to buy. You're rolling your custom dice block to pick exactly where you want to land to make something happen. You have more power than ever before. It's literally like Super Mario Party. You have so much that you can do on every turn to kind of actually control the outcome this time around. But there's still that trademark luck and happenstance. You can still be in first on the last turn of the game. Someone hits chance time. You lose 2 stars. It's
Oh no.
over for you. But that's Mario Party. I love that stuff. But if you don't love that stuff, they have this new pro rules option where all that stuff goes away. Chance time is gone. The hidden blocks that you can just stumble upon and get a free star are gone. You vote for what minigame you want to play. So you can pick one you think you're going to win. You can Pro Rules really tries to dilute all the luck down to a minimum, and it feels like you're playing a real board game with decisions. You're still rolling dice, so there's still luck involved, but real board games have dice too. But then you're really in control of what happens in Pro Rules. So it's awesome. They're kind of catering to everybody with this one.
So talk to me about how the main board game mode that everybody is so familiar with kind
Mhm.
of plays out and why it works so well.
Yeah, so the main game, it does take longer than ever before. I think that if you play Mario Party 2, it takes about an hour 15 minutes to do a 20-turn game. In Jamboree, it takes 2 hours to do a 15-turn game. So it is a longer
Jeez.
experience. So that is it's really, you really just have to think of this as a board game. That's really how I like to sell it, is you are playing a virtual board game. Sometimes board games take hour and a half to 2 hours. It's not like you're sitting down to play Mario Kart for
And
a
if you're
little bit.
playing Monopoly, you're there for the entire
You're there
day.
all day. Yeah, exactly. So the board game is still, it's 4 players. You roll your dice, you land on a blue space, you get coins, you land on a red space, you lose coins. All that stuff you want is here. But they've added something really big called Jamboree Buddies, which are new characters that are characters that come to visit in the middle of the game. Donkey Kong will land on a random space on the board. The first person to get to Donkey Kong kicks off a showdown minigame, which are these new showcase minigames that are way longer than your standard minigame you play at the end of each turn. They take roughly 3 to 4 minutes for a
Oh.
showdown minigame. And the winner of the showdown minigame wins the ally. And that ally goes to the player that won. And when you have the ally, you can buy 2 stars when you get to a star space. But if you land on a Bowser space, you visit Bowser twice. So it just doubles everything you do, but it only lasts 3 turns. So you have to really be smart about,
Hmm.
oh, I got to make sure I get to the star in the next 3 turns. I got to buy a triple dice, use it on my next turn. Like, you're really calculating, you're planning out your next few moves, which I don't feel like you're usually able to do in a Mario Party game that much until now. But the showdown minigames are awesome. Donkey Kong's is, you're playing a rhythm game where you're banging on congas and he sets the rhythm and then you match it. And it's like, that is such a cool reference for DK.
Yeah.
Waluigi's, you play pinball. It's Waluigi's pinball. It's so cool what they've done for these characters and their mini games, and it honors Mario history in such an awesome way. That's like, wow, they really, really get it this time. And it's just such a celebration of Mario and Mario Party that feels like such a triumphant return for this series that, like you said, has been meandering for so long.
And you mentioned mini games on a few occasions here. That is
Mhm.
obviously the centerpiece of the Mario Party experience. How did the mini games pan out in this entry?
They're great. They're really, really great. I think that Jamboree and Superstars are really nice companion pieces to each other, because I think that Jamboree has much better boards than Superstars. There are 7 of them, and they're all awesome, and they're all way more complicated and strategy filled than the ones in Superstars. But Superstars still takes it in the minigame front, because that game
Hmm.
had 80 mini games you could play in Mario Party, from classic games, Mario Party 1 through 10. It was awesome. Jamboree has roughly 50 games that you can play at the end of each turn. 40 of them are new, about 10 of them are returning from the GameCube era of Mario Party. But it's a really, really great set that, even though there's only 50 of them and you'll probably have played them all by the time you've seen all 7 of Jamboree's boards, I'm still not tired of them because they're really great. And it gets to that point where in the beginning you're getting to know them, it's fun to experience them for the first time, but then it's like Mario Kart. It's like, oh, I know this track, I know this mini game, I know what I need to do here to win. And it just becomes a part of the experience of like setting up a board game, and you know exactly what to expect. So it's a little bit fewer than I would like, but I'd still say it's a big, big positive. There's nothing negative. And the mini games, the new ones, are really, really awesome. Probably the best set of mini games that Nintendo Cube has ever made. So it's the best
Wow.
mini games in at least 15 years.
What's your favorite one? Does one come to mind?
Yeah, I really love, there's 2 I'll shout out. There's a 2 versus 2 game called Prime Cut, where you're cutting these misshapen cuts of steak, and you have to slice them exactly in half with a partner. So like, it'll be really thick on the left side and then really skinny on the right side. So you have to figure out with your partner where exactly you have 50% of the meat on either side of your cut. That one's
Oh,
really
wow.
fun. And then my favorite 4-player one is, you are in this park and you have a camera, and it gives you an example of a photo you need to replicate exactly. Like, oh, there's a Shy Guy who is serving ice cream to a Koopa Troopa as a blue toad is running by on the right side of the screen. So you look and you set the scene, you set the zoom, and then you wait to click that button to capture the photo until everything looks perfect, until that toad runs right into frame. And you do that in 3 rounds, and then whoever scores the most points wins. That is a really fun one that kind of feels like Facelift, where you're just exactly recapturing the example the game gives you, and it's a classic.
I love Facelift.
It's the best one ever. Yeah.
And one of the big selling points of Super Mario Party Jamboree are these side modes. There's Koopathlon, and there's one where you're like fighting a giant
Bowser Kaboom Squad. Yeah.
Bowser Kaboom Squad. Talk to me a little bit about these modes.
Yeah, so this is where I think Jamboree falls a little bit short, not enough to hurt my score of it. I gave it a 9 out of 10. I think it's an amazing game, but the bulk of your time is still going to just be spent in core Mario Party and with the mini games. These side modes are fine. Koopathlon has 9 mode specific mini games. These are mini games, single player mini games you're competing in simultaneously against 19 others. So it's kind of like Tetris 99, where you're doing your own thing, but then you get a power up that you send off to someone else's screen to mess them up. Like you get a blooper and you hit that blooper, it goes to the person who's directly in front of you in the standings and inks their screen. And the mini games they're decent. It's like collect as many coins as you can, or you're running this pastry oven and you need to pull out the bread right when it's done baking before it burns, and you score a different number of points for whatever type of pastry it is. And they're all fun, but there's only 9 of them. And I feel like after you play an hour of Koopathlon, you'll really get kind of everything it has to offer. And unlike Mario Party, which feels infinitely replayable and the mini games are never tiresome, Koopathlon's like, I'm kind of sick of this already. So it's fine. I think it's admirable how many swings they take to give new single player options in this game for people who don't have friends or family locally to play with. You can jump online and play strangers in Koopathlon. You can cooperate with 7 others in Bowser Kaboom Squad to take down Godzilla Bowser, who's stomping around this city. And that's similarly fine. There's co-op mini games that can be aggravating to try and work with strangers that you can't talk to. Like there's a game where you're passing around these mushroom cards and you're trying to get it in order from the beginning of drawing a mushroom to the end of drawing a mushroom. And when you can't talk to the people, like, take my card, you need this one, you need to pass it down 2 spots, it's a little frustrating. So those are a little bit throwaway, but it's fine because I played this game for 45 hours and 40 of those hours were just spent in Mario Party and with the mini games, and I loved pretty much every second of it.
That's quite the review period there.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, but I've finished my review probably 20 hours in, and then I was just playing every night because I was having so much fun with it, because it was just so exciting to have Mario Party back.
That's always the mark of a good review game, is like when you finish a review but you want to keep playing. Like that's such a rarity for me, but when it does happen, it's like, man, I know that there's something special here. Yeah. And my favorite is Mario Party Superstars, which, greatest hits compilation. So it's kind of cheating. But you mentioned it is a huge step up from Mario Party Superstars. How does it, kind of not only live up to that tough act to follow of being a greatest hits album, essentially, but become a huge step up?
I think that just the amount of content here is the thing for one. Jamboree has 22 playable characters. So Superstars had 10, and this one over doubles that, and it throws in new ones like Pauline and Ninja, and there's evil characters like Bowser and Bowser Jr. and Monty Mole, Shy Guy, Boo, Koopa. There's so many characters to choose from, which is just a really fun thing. And I think why it's a huge step up is really the boards and the item selection are just so much bigger. Mario Party Superstars kind of just became a race for the golden pipe in the second half of its games, and that was kind of the most powerful item that you could get. But in one of my favorite maps, it's called Rainbow Galleria. It's a shopping mall. There are stores that you have to land on. You don't just get to shop at them by passing them. You have to land on the happening space in front of them to be able to shop there.
So you said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's a super item shop where you can buy a super dual glove where you can just challenge someone for a star. And just on your turn, use the glove and say, Brian, we're dueling with a star on the line. There's nothing like that in Superstars. It's just so much power that can totally turn the tides with these items that just really enhances the board game.
Yeah, well, talking about the Galleria level or the board,
Hmm.
like there's like the kind of like flash sale, I think it's called, where like the
Yes.
characters will all does that impact the people on the board, or is that just like for show that they're all rushing into the board and then like it makes it so things are cheaper in the stores?
The flash sale happens every 5 turns, and it cuts the price of everything in half. So stars cost 10 coins, items are all cost half less, but for 1 turn only. So you get into these situations with it where if you win a jamboree, buddy, and you see that a flash sale is happening, you got to get to the star. Because if you get there on the turn, the flash sale is in action, you can buy 2 stars for 20 coins total. That's so crazy. Like there's just every turn is different, and superstars didn't really feel like that. It's like you're playing on the board, okay, turn 3, let's see. But here the flash sales change things. In Goomba Lagoon, it's like a Zelda dungeon where these water levels rise and lower, and it changes the layout of the map drastically every time that happens. Oh, I can get to the boo now, but when that water rises, I can't, I'm stuck here. So you really have to be thinking ahead, and I think that the board design just feels very modern, where Superstars, the board design was Nintendo 64, which was great. But these are like Nintendo 64 formula, but developed in 2024. And it's the best they've ever been.
You said that the Galleria level was one of your favorite
Yeah.
boards. What is your favorite board?
I go back and forth. I go back and forth so much. There's so many great ones. I think right now it probably is the Lagoon. I really like the Goomba Lagoon, and just it's a really big board and there's so much going on with it with the water levels, and there's this volcano at the top of the map that when you pass it, either Goombas shoot out that give you coins when you pass them, or lava shoots out that take your coins when you pass them. So you have to take that into account too. And I have to tell this story real quick about these.
Go for it.
It does so many cute things depending on which character you're playing as, which I don't think this game has ever done before. If you're playing as Boo and you go to visit a Boo to steal a star or coins from an opponent, the Boo that you visit says, "Wow, I feel like I'm looking in a mirror." Like it recognizes that you're playing as Boo. Or when you're playing as Bowser Jr. and you stop by Kamek's shop, Kamek's like, "Oh, welcome, Your Majesty, Lord Bowser Jr. What can I get you, sir?" Or when the golden Goombas shoot out of the volcano and land on all of the spaces, if you're playing as Mario and you run by them to get coins, Mario punches them out of the way. He kicks them, he stomps on them to get the coins. But when you're playing as a Goomba or as one of Bowser's minions, they just politely pass by and like wave to their coworkers. They leave them unharmed. Like there's just so much detail here. That's just they went the extra mile everything. I think in the GameCube era, Mario parties were coming out so frequently it kind of felt like, oh, here's the next one, kind of the bare minimum. But here they just went the extra step with every little detail.
It sounds like it's fantastic. I mean, your
Yeah.
review, like you said, you gave it a 9. You can read that
Mhm.
over on IGN.com. And your quote at the bottom says, Super Mario Party Jamboree is the series' newest superstar. See what you did there. With fantastic boards, minigames, and customizable rules that return to the classic formula while also confidently improving upon it. And Super Mario Party Jamboree is available now on Switch. Do you have anything else you want to say? Any parting shots before we move on to the final segment here?
Yeah, just that I also got to try it online with folks from Nintendo ahead of launch, and it ran really, really well. So if you don't have friends to play with locally, if you got people online to play with, I think that they nailed it.
That's awesome to hear. I am so excited to dive in now that I have it on my Switch. Thank you for giving your review, Logan.
Of
But we are
course.
going to take our final break of this episode. And when we get back, we're going to do definitive ranking and get Logan's eShop gem of the week. We will be right back. We are back, and it's time for Definitive Ranking, a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our own personal top 5 lists. You all know I'm not the biggest fan of motion controls, but sometimes I have to admit when they are done well. That's why this week we are going to be ranking our top 5 uses of motion controls. So, Logan, I'm going to have you start with 5, count it down to 1, give me a quick sentence or two about each.
Yeah, so I took the approach of I just picked games on Switch. I also don't like, I'm not a big motion control fan either. I really don't reflect super fondly on the Wii era, mostly because of some of its uses of motion controls. But I think the Switch has some good ones. My number 5 is WarioWare Move It. I think that that was a really, really fun return to the smooth moves formula for WarioWare. And I just love some of the games they make you do. Like they make you pose like a chicken and then you control a cuckoo in Ocarina of Time. And it doesn't get better than that. Number 4 is Super Mario Odyssey. I was hesitant when that game came out about using the split Joy-Con controls, but I actually think it worked out really well. Throwing Cappy to capture things, and then some of the little things you do, like shaking to jump higher when you're certain captures. It worked nicely, and it felt additive rather than gimmicky. And I think that's usually my favorite use of it. Number 3, Skyward Sword HD. Skyward Sword, one of my least favorite Zelda games. I think they nailed it in the Switch port, and now it's one of my favorite 3D Zelda games. I adore
Wow.
it. I think that the motion controls worked really, really well with the Joy-Con, and I 100% of that game on Switch. It was just a joy to run through, and I used motion controls the whole time, and it worked really well for me.
That's always been my deterrent is I don't want to use motion controls. I tried it on Wii twice
Yeah.
and I started it up on Switch, but I was using the button controls
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of bounced off again. And I don't know if the motion controls would help. I think it might just be like that opening area that I mean, I get through the Skyloft stuff, and
hmm
then once I get on the ground, it just feels like such a slog. And I'm hoping that like I can push through one of these days. But
It is a very slow-paced Zelda game. It is a very methodical, puzzly, step-by-step game. I don't think its flavor is for everybody, but I found that I loved it once I got that cleaner version because they clean up a lot besides just the controls in the Switch version.
sure.
It's a much more streamlined thing. And then number 2, sticking with Zelda, just the aiming in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the
Yes.
Wild. Yeah, it's again right. It's one of those things that it's not the main focus. It's just this really additive thing, and I think it works really well. And then building with Ultra Hand and Tears, I wouldn't want to do that without motion controls.
Mm.
And then number 1, also very similar to the Zeldas, Splatoon 3, I think has the best motion controls on Switch. It is, if you want to be a pro Splatoon player, you basically have to use motion controls, and I was hesitant for it in Splatoon 1. I eventually forced myself to, and then in Splatoon 3, I'm an S rank player, and it's because I use motion controls, and it's so much fun and so satisfying.
So many people have told me that. I adore Splatoon, and I've
Yeah.
never used motion controls. I usually the first thing I do in a Splatoon game when it has you do the tutorial is I get through that and I turn off motion controls. And I've heard so many people tell me, and I've tried to play it with motion controls. How long does it take you to kind of adapt? Because I've heard so many people tell me that, and I have always bounced off, and I'm like, no, screw this. I'm doing the dual stick like
Mhm.
control scheme.
Yeah, so Splatoon 1, I refused to do it, and I just played the roller because it's easier to be successful without them. And then Splatoon 2, I switched to the dualies, and I think I played with motion from the very start in Splatoon 2. I'd say I didn't feel comfortable with it maybe for 15 or 20 hours. It takes a
Oh my
long
god.
time to get really good with it, but then once you're in, you can never go back, is really how it feels.
Interesting. Okay, well, noted. I will I actually did want to give a special shout out to the Splatoon franchise in this list even though it didn't make my list because so many
Mm-hmm.
people have sworn by those motion controls. So I'm so
Yep.
happy that you actually did that.
Yeah, it's
Um
the best. And it's tough in handheld mode sometimes because you're trying to look at the screen while also
that's
using
fair.
motion, but it's still worth it.
You know, I took a completely different route for my
Okay.
list. I went almost exclusively Wii games.
Okay, interesting.
So I'm gonna do number 5 is going to be the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom aiming because I
Mhm.
think that there is a lot of really like minute aiming details that you can get with the because basically like you're lining it up with the stick and then you just tweak it a little bit by holding up
Yeah.
the motion controls and that does help a lot in those games and I've never actually used the motion controls for Ultra Hand but if you're telling me that's the best way to
Mhm.
do it then maybe I should try it. I was actually I talked about this on All Things Gamers where I've been getting the itch to replay some older games and I'm like between like Persona 4 Golden,
Mhm.
Ghost of Tsushima
Mm.
and the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom combo. Those are like the replays that I've been kind of itching to do lately. And if I do the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom combo, I will absolutely try the Ultra Hand motion controls based on your recommendation.
Yeah, it's like if you are like me and you build these vehicles and you want them to be really symmetrical, it's like, oh, that wheel is just a little off, and then it's like a correction, like you said, you just tilt it a little bit and you get it right where you want it.
All right, well, I'll have to try that sometime. Number
Yeah.
4, I'm going to go with Red Steel 2.
Oh, cool. Great pick.
Because this was like one of the showcase this and like Wii Sports Resort and Skyward Sword were like the Wii Motion Plus showcase
Mhm.
software and I remember Red Steel 1 was the thing that sold me on the Wii when like the Wii was announced and they put out a trailer for Red Steel 1, I was like, "Oh my god, like you can shoot, you can hold the Wii remote like a sword." Like that's the first thing everybody thought of when they picked up a Wii remote, right? Is like, "Oh, this is a lightsaber," or "Oh, this is a sword."
Yeah.
Red Steel 1 sucked. So, like, I remember, like, I was an RA in college, and there was one of my residents. I did not get a Wii at launch, but one of my residents went to like a midnight release, and he came back triumphantly holding the Wii over his head. He couldn't get Twilight Princess, but he got Red Steel, and obviously he had Wii Sports. So he fired up Red Steel 1, and we were like so excited, like, oh my god, like this. He was like frothing at the mouth to like get to play this game, and he just gets like, I mean, in the cutscene you die immediately, so that's not supposed to, that's not a problem, but like he started and like he was swinging his arm around, nothing was working properly. He was
Uh-huh.
trying to shoot at the enemies, nothing was like functioning the way it should.
Yeah.
He gets killed immediately, and the entire room, you just feel the air deflate, and there's like, yeah, man, that's that cool game system you got there.
Yeah.
You know,
Uh-huh.
when you're trying to show off cool technology, the last thing that you want is something to
Mhm.
go wrong. And you just ask Shigeru Miyamoto when he was showing off
Yes.
Skyward Sword.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
just gonna say that too.
yeah, Red Steel 2 fixed all those problems, and it was a fantastic showcase for what motion controls can be and how they can enhance the experience rather than hinder. And plus, it was a cool like Western setting.
Mhm.
So that was a very cool usage of motion controls. The rest of mine are mostly gimmicks, though.
Okay.
I'm gonna go number 3, and this is gonna be a kind of the laughable entry, but I mean it wholeheartedly. The Carnival Games
Oh,
franchise,
nice.
because those individual Carnival games are so well made with motion controls. And I'm talking whether you're doing the Wii version or whether you're doing like the Xbox Connect version. I think there was a PlayStation Move version as well. Like
Mhm.
they knew how to implement motion controls in ways that just felt fun, even if they were 100% gimmicks. They took this franchise, which should have just been shovelware. It should have just been like among those games that you have referenced, Logan, of like, this is why I don't like the Wii era, because it
Yeah.
has all these crappy shoehorned in motion controls, but it actually made them meaningful. And that's
Mhm.
why I put that on this list, because they thoughtfully implemented them and it was like tailor made for it.
Mhm.
Number 2, you referenced it in your list, WarioWare Smooth Moves.
Yeah.
I still think it's the best WarioWare game, even though Move It is also very good. Um, it was my favorite Wii game. Like I,
Nice.
I don't think there was another Wii game that topped it. Like maybe Mario Galaxy, but that's about it. Like
Mhm.
it's up there. You would not expect a WarioWare game to be like a top 5 game on a console, but I really do believe WarioWare Smooth Moves is one of the best multiplayer games of that era and one of the best overall games on the Wii.
Yeah, it
And
rules. I agree. It's still the best WarioWare. That game is amazing. And probably, I agree, top 5 Wii game easily.
so good. One of the best multiplayer games as well.
Yeah.
Number 1, speaking of multiplayer games and best Wii games, it's Wii Sports. Come on.
Mhm.
Like the bowling, like people got into the bowling. Like it was
Yeah.
not just like, oh yeah, cool, come over and we'll play bowling. It's like we'd go, my grandparents bought a Wii to play Wii Sports. My
Yeah.
parents had a Wii to play Wii Sports. I don't think they owned any other games unless like,
Mhm.
maybe somebody gave them one for like Christmas or something. It's like, "Oh, you have a Wii? Here's
Mhm.
another," and they never played it. They never probably even took off the shrink wrap of any other game. It was just Wii Sports. The
Mhm.
Wii for many people was a Wii Sports machine, in particular Wii Bowling.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. That series still persists to this day, even though Nintendo Switch Sports doesn't have the same popularity or charm of Wii Sports.
Mhm.
It's the legacy of Wii Sports. It's one of the most popular video games of all time, and there's a reason for it. And the motion controls, it was a tech demo that became something much bigger than a tech demo.
Mhm.
So that's my list. That leads us to the final segment, which is the eShop Gem of the Week. It's a chance to shout out a game that might not otherwise get too much shine on this show. Logan, what is your eShop Gem of the Week?
My eShop gem of the week is Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. This game came out 4 months ago in June of this year from Sega, and I picked it because of what we said about Mario Party, because I feel very similarly about Banana Rumble and Jamboree. Wow, this is a return to form from one of my favorite series of all time that had lost its way for the last decade. You can apply both of that statement to both of these games, and Banana Rumble is the best Monkey Ball game since Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2 on the GameCube. And
Agreed.
high praise for me. Monkey Ball 2, I say there's one perfect video game in existence, and it's Super Monkey Ball 2. That game is absolutely perfect. And Banana Rumble doesn't quite hit those highs. The level design never gets quite as insane or difficult or crazy, but it's a really solid set of 200 levels with crazy optional challenges like get the gold banana and get to the goal in time, or collect 90 bananas before you get to the goal. Every level has a speed run time you have to try and unlock too. There's so much content here. And again, like Jamboree, there's so many parallels. The main thing they marketed here was this online battle royale mode. Yeah, that thing's fine. I played it like twice. I'm never going to touch it again, but I keep going back to the core Monkey Ball game. I played this game for 60 hours this year. I love it so much.
Yeah, it's a great game. I remember going to a preview event in New York for it and Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
And I came away having more fun with Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble because I was just like, oh my God, this is like the real deal Super Monkey Ball return. Like, you know, we've gotten Banana Blitz, we got Banana Mania, which, you know, Banana Blitz HD, and Banana Mania was fun, but it was just like a remake of the early Monkey Ball games. So, and as you indicated, those are very, very good. But Banana Rumble is like the first time that I have like hope for this franchise going forward, because they figured it out. They cracked the code of how to make this feel good in 2024. I reviewed it extremely highly. And yeah, I did talk about that on this podcast, you know, because it's Switch exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I highly recommend it as well. It is $50, so a little bit more expensive than the typical eShop gems that we shout out on this show.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you want to check out a Super Monkey Ball game, this would probably be the one.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember what you scored it?
Oh man, I would love to tell you, Logan, but
I know. It's a bummer.
mysterious entity has taken down the website of GameInformer.com.
Yeah.
But you can always go to IGN.com and see some reviews. Let's see what IGN did.
I reviewed it for IGN.
What'd you give it? Do you
I
remember?
give it an 8. I called it great. Yeah, I think it's really great. I think just what it was, I was between an 8 and a 9, and what kept me from it was that the levels just don't quite hit the same as 1 and 2. But it's still it's an awesome game.
Well, you guys don't do like decimal points on your scores.
Whole numbers only.
It's either an 8 or a 9. See, we did quarter decimal points, so I think I may have given it an 8.25. So we were pretty aligned.
Yeah, that's great
on our score. So yeah, I was kind of there too, where it was like, if it was just whole numbers at Game Informer, it would have been between an 8 and a 9. So I probably would have gone with an 8 though, just like you did.
Yeah.
But you know, before we wrap up here, for those who are not $10 patrons and are wondering what's happening on the other side of the fence on All Things Gamers, this week, I had so many questions submitted from the community a few weeks ago that I took the entire episode of this week's All Things Gamers to dig through some of the leftover community questions. I also had a few additional multi-platform focused questions submitted by the wonderful folks over on the Discord. And then I went ahead and gave my impressions of the new boxing game, Undisputed.
Cool.
So if you want to listen to that or any of the other past episodes of All Things Gamers, you can become a $10 patron to the All Things Nintendo podcast. But that wraps up this episode of All Things Nintendo, Logan. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. This was a blast, and I hope to come back soon.
I'll definitely have you back. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. As you know, the Patreon and the associated Discord server are the best ways to get any questions or comments in. You can also get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com, social media at Brian P. Shea, and coincidentally, at Brian P. Shea is also my YouTube channel name. And if you would like to subscribe to my channel, it would mean a lot. Logan, where can people find you online?
Find me on Twitter at LoganJPlant. We'll see how long that lasts. I might be migrating over to the other place at the same handle. And then I'm on IGN's Nintendo show, Nintendo Voice Chat, every Friday morning. And my personal Nintendo show, that's called Toadstool Boardroom. That goes up on Thursdays on audio services and YouTube as well.
And yes, find us all on the other place, aka Blue Sky. That's where a lot of people are migrating. I also am very active on Threads. But Logan, thank you so much for joining me. That is our show for this week. Thanks to everyone for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Before we wrap up this episode of All Things Nintendo, I just want to give a special shout out to my $10 patrons over on Patreon: Aaron Smith, Abdullah, Elena R., Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Brooke Obscura, Chain Whippin, Chaps My Ass, Chris Callie, Colton Bredlau, Dan Norman, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jackal, Jacob Naheen, Jason Thompson, Jawar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Jordan Sloat, Jose Villalobos, Joseph Jury, Joshua Duproy, Justin Childress, Cody Gibson, Creeper207, Marshall Thompson, Megan S., Michael Anderson, Nintendo 101, Paul at Drunk on Mako, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Roger Reichert, Russell Sayer, Scott Matthews, Sir Phobos, Smithy Poo, Tux DC, Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man, Zach Marcus, Zachary Pliggy, and Zek Three Swords Sama. Thank you all so much for your continued patronage of this podcast. It's because of you that I'm able to keep doing this.